Got a great show for you today.
Ilana Mar.
And it's about Ilana Mar. Stop the music. All right, here's the thing. Welcome to the program. Tonight, we're going to try to do something that people in television don't do. We're going to try to make sense out of a very complex story. Last week, the media continued to make President Trump out to be a total and complete racist, especially after he tweeted this. And, get out of the country, why don't you go back where you came from or whatever. The so-called squad of freshman congresswomen struck back at the president with outrage to spare. Well, here's the thing. At least two of the squad members, now, we know, seem to have some serious prejudice of their own. They might be called racist, too, if that was racist what the president did. Representatives Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar said something very similar to Trump before they were elected to the House. So this is, why don't we deport you wherever you came from? That's from Ilhan Omar. Just yesterday, also, speaking of race, the House passed a bill to oppose the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement that seeks to punish Israel for the Palestinian conflict. Omar was one of the only 17 congressmen to vote against the bill. But as we've discussed before on this show, she is also an active fundraiser for the Council on American Islamic Relations, otherwise known as CARE. You may recall, CARE has well-known ties to the Holy Land Foundation, which raised funds for Hamas, the Palestinian terrorist group. As yesterday's BDS vote demonstrates, there is a major ideological rift in the Democratic Party between traditional supporters of Israel and Omar on the radical left. Democrats have some major soul-searching to do. Who am I? I got to take a trip maybe to Europe with a backpack to find out who I really am. They're supported by the media, they've embraced Omar, they have embraced the radical left. Now they have to deal with anti-Semitism and a lot more. But don't hold your breath, because I don't think anybody's going to hold anybody responsible for anything anymore, because in America we don't do that anymore. The left has not asked Omar any tough questions about her views, neither have the Democrats, especially not about her legal skeletons in the closet. Does Omar belong in Congress, or does she belong in jail? I know that's a pretty tough question, and it seems like hyperbole, but when you hear this program by the end of the hour and look at all of the facts, I think you will understand that's a reasonable question to ask. I'm going to take you through the story tonight that will be called, and is already called, a right-wing nutjob conspiracy nonsense. Okay, all right. It will be buried online and very hard to find. Google's not going to make this easy to find, neither will YouTube. But I will lay out the case in full. This is not a witch hunt. It is not to convict. These are facts that we have found through several sources, through several journalists, and they are not meant to convict. They are meant to inform. No major media outlet has been willing to do so, with an exception lately of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. This is not an Obama birther type rabbit trail. This is about what Ilhan Omar did on her own as an adult and as a U.S. citizen. So you know, we reached out to Omar's office and we invited her to appear on the show tonight. She has declined. I find it disappointing, because if there is a logical explanation, only she can clear it up, as you will see. As we have spent the last 2 weeks trying to figure out a way to explain the saga of Ilhan Omar, I kept coming back to 70s sitcoms. But which 70s show is it exactly? Is it All in the Family? It kind of works. In fact, sitcoms of the 1970s seem to work well as a way to tell this large, complicated story, and I'll get to that here in a minute. But U.S. Representative from Minnesota, Ilhan Omar, the media had made her an overnight celebrity, well before she'd accomplished anything as a legislator. And the question is, why? Well, maybe it's because she checks so many of the ideological boxes. She's a female, she's an immigrant, she's non-white, she's Muslim, she's a hijab wearer, mostly. She is a far-left Democrat. But let's be honest. If another female representative checked each of those boxes, but she was a Republican, we would probably still know about her, but for much different reasons. We would just probably know that she's insisting on wearing a hijab, which of course is a symbol of female oppression. And if the mainstream media teaches us anything about Republicans, it is that they are all about oppressing women. Omar is innocent until proven guilty, but we have to look at the facts tonight. Omar was first elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives in 2016. She had not even been in the seat for 1 year before she was a guest on The Daily Show. Weeks later, she was on the cover of Time magazine. Remember, this is a freshman state representative in Minnesota. Then, of course, she danced. Oh, she danced. There she is, dancing her heart away in a Maroon 5 music video. Then she starred in a documentary about herself that came out just in time for her run for U.S. Congress last fall. The documentary is called, what else? Time for Elon. All right, so the media has made Omar an icon. But what happens when some rather large cracks begin to appear in the halo surrounding your icon? Cracks including campaign finance violations, tax fraud, bigamy, and even possibly that she married her own brother to somehow or another game the immigration system or game the education system, or both. The media now can't double back and investigate her now because, well, that would make them look bad. Saving face, is it even important to the media? I mean, to a certain extent, I'm sure it is, but with their approval rating hovering around 9%, I don't know, looking bad is their main concern. I think they're more concerned with the fact that Omar is a useful tool of the far left, with very powerful connections. Now, these are not new allegations against Omar. They've been around for over 3 years, but when people hear it at first, they're like, wait a minute, that can't be true. But the media cannot do any work. They can't admit that they didn't do their homework before making her an overnight star. So instead, the story becomes about the vicious partisan attacks on this sweet Omar from right-wing nut jobs who hate women, and especially Muslims, or more especially Muslim women. But now, in Minnesota, at least, there is so much smoke surrounding Omar that even the Minneapolis Star-Tribune could no longer ignore it. At first, this was just an accusation on a Somali political blog. Then it was assumed to be a smear campaign by conservative bloggers. But once the state of Minnesota confirmed many of the facts that these bloggers had been writing about for years, the Star-Tribune finally decided to engage in something we used to call journalism. The Star-Tribune did its own investigation of the allegations against Omar. They not only corroborated many of the facts reported by online journalists, but they also could not find any evidence to refute other basic facts from the story. So let's start with those facts that are absolutely confirmed. First, just last month, Minnesota's Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board confirmed that Omar improperly used campaign money to pay a lawyer to fix her tax filings. She was ordered to reimburse her campaign $2,500. The state board also confirmed she used campaign money to pay for personal travel expenses and for speaking engagement trips unrelated to her legislative duties. She was ordered to reimburse her campaign over $3,400 for the travel expenses and fined another $500 for the violations. So basically, she got a slap on the wrist. But we wouldn't be here tonight if that was all there was. Perhaps the biggest confirmation to come out of the state of Minnesota's investigation is the fact that Omar broke federal tax laws. In 2014 and 2015, she filed joint married tax returns stating that she was married to Ahmed Hersey when she was actually legally married to a different man named Ahmed Elmi. Now, in the real world, getting married to somebody else when you're already married is known as bigamy. It's illegal. And you can definitely not file joint tax returns with someone who is not your legal spouse. But no one wants to take this story on because Omar is a political hot potato. And because it's a very complicated story, because who is the man she was legally married to? Now, it's taken me a long time to understand this story, and I tried to think of a way to explain it in a more understandable way. Her marriage was a little unconventional, and my first thought was, I know, we can explain this with the 70s sitcom Three's Company.
Come and knock if you dare.
Come and knock if you dare.
Nothing weird here at all.
Nothing weird here at all.
Only marriage for him and her and him. Three's Company also. Come and sleep on our floor.
Come and sleep on our floor.
'Cause you might be my bro.
'Cause you might be my bro.
Really, it's just for our tuition pay. Three's Company also. Marriage is so much fun again. Now it's time again to down at NDSU.
Down at NDSU.
Three's Company also.
Yeah, couldn't be Three's Company too, because we are riddled with lawyers on this program. And we spend almost $25 on that. This is the timeline. I want you to know that what I'm showing you is the timeline according to Ilhan Omar. She has an amazing marriage history, and this is how she tried to explain it. Now, Omar has not answered any questions that keep coming up about her tax fraud, except through a campaign person. So far, it's really unclear what penalties she will face, if any, for the tax law violations. If you were me, we'd already be paying the $100,000 fine and serving the 3 years in prison. But if you're a hijab-wearing congresswoman, the first one in history, well, you get a different rule book, I think. The wildest, weirdest claim that has plagued Omar since she entered politics is that her second husband, Elmi, is actually her biological brother. Okay, let me show you. Allegedly, she married for immigration purposes, we think, or maybe to help Elmi get a student visa and or a student loan and attend North Dakota State University, which is, you know, I mean, who wouldn't break the law to attend that? All right, so let me go through the timeline here. Faith marriage to Hersey. This is her husband here, Hersey. They're dancing, they're so happy, but it's a faith marriage, so I'm not sure the dancing happened yet. But she has a faith marriage in her faith tradition, which of course is Muslim. So wedding bells in her faith marriage in 2002. Now they get busy, as most young couples do, and they have a couple of kids. But then things turn out a little sad. Yes, the home that they had built together, with the heart over the door, turns out that they have to have a faith divorce. Now, I don't know how you get a faith divorce, but they got one. So they get a faith divorce. I don't know who kept the faith kids or what happened. But then just a few months later, in 2009, it's marriage bells again. And this time she has a legal marriage to Elmi. And it's a faith marriage too, except this time it's not Islam, it's Christian. She has a Christian minister do the ceremony, even though her husband, her, and her ex-husband are all Muslim. Okay, that's not weird at all, because they honeymoon at college at North Dakota State University. Now, you might ask yourself, yes, but where was their love nest? Well, their love nest is really kind of interesting. Here's the documentation, by the way, of the second marriage here. This is the application. Here's their actual marriage certificate. And where do they live? Well, we have here the document from the university showing that her and her new husband, Elmi, went to school together. But they lived in this house. And they lived in this house while Hersey was living there, and the two kids. So kids, this isn't going to screw you up at all. Mommy's just married a new man, and we're going to live with Daddy's or with mommy's faith partner, along with mommy's legal partner, and you two kids, and we're going to school. Don't worry about it. By the way, here is the documentation. He tried to open up a business where he's stating he lives at this house. By the way, Hersey also is living at this house. So they're all living together, and there's also, I think there's 25 or 26 legal citations where either one of them say, oh yeah, I'm sorry, officer, by the way, here's my address. So the three of them, it's like Three's Company also. So they're here, and then they go to college, and then in 2011, they graduate. Now here's what's so sad about this. The same year they graduate, she separates from Elmi. It's another sad book. These are tough years, college years. Who knows what they were doing, because they're not Muslim. They were Christians, so they were probably partying like crazy in college, and that put a lot of strain, so they had to separate. So they separate at the same time they graduate from NDSU. But here's what's crazy. Just a month later, she falls in love again with Hersey. Now, I'm not sure if Elmi is also living with Hersey in the Love Shack. I don't know. We don't know where he goes. We just know they separated, but that doesn't mean he's not living there anymore. Again, we don't know. So a month after she separates, not divorces, separates, she has another faith marriage, a faith remarriage, a Muslim faith remarriage to Hersey. I don't know what happened to her Christian marriage. But kids, learn a lesson. Christians, bad. Muslim marriages work. They last. So she comes back and she has another faith remarriage in 2012. In fact, it's going so well that in 2014 she's filing her taxes from this house, claiming that Hersey, the first husband, is her legal husband, even though her other husband, the second husband, Elmi, is actually the one she's legally married to. Remember, she's separated and only married in faith at this time. But don't worry, it's not confusing at all for the kids, because at this time she has 3 children. They had 2 children back here. Now they have another one. Oh, 5. No, I'm sorry, he's still living there. 6 company also. All right, now here's the problem. She files the taxes, real tax returns with her faith husband. She probably didn't realize that they were real. They might have been faith tax returns. So in 2014, and then, 2015, I did it again, 2 years in a row. But she might not be concentrating that much on what was happening when she was doing her taxes, because that same year, she went to London, and we have photos. Here she is. Oh my gosh! Look at this! And here, there she is with her separated husband. Now, I don't know what Hersey thought about this, or if he even knew she was going over to London to be with her separated husband. He might have, and the kids probably were crying, so she probably kept that quiet. But were things starting to be rekindled? We don't know. We just know we have pictures of them together in London, which is kind of a problem. Because after she wins the Minnesota House seat, she legally divorces Elmi. And in this, here's the document where she's filing for divorce, she says over and over again, I don't know where he is. I haven't seen him since we were in college. Wait a minute. I don't think that's true. So now she legally divorces, and then immediately legally marries Hersey. Oh, it's such an old-fashioned couple, isn't it? So she wins the house right after she's legally married, and spiritually married, I think, too. The last thing, 2019, the Minnesota State Board nails her for campaign finance violations, which we just showed you. And Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, wow, they get her for all these violations. And then the Minneapolis Star-Tribune confirms a lot of this. And what they can't confirm, which we're going to show you in a minute, the things they can't confirm, this is her timeline. The things they can't confirm, like the picture of the brother, is that really her brother? They say they can't confirm it without her. That's a whole different story. Wait until you hear that story. The possibility that Omar married her biological brother, weird, right? But in a minute you'll see, is it really that far-fetched? New developments on this story that you don't want to miss. Up next, Three's Company doesn't tell the story, but the Brady Bunch does. Except really kind of not. Next. So let's look at the facts. Did Ilhan Omar marry her brother or not? I mean, for a long time I didn't even want to entertain this story because it's just ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous. But the reporting that continues to come out from online journalists and the Minneapolis Star, the Tribune, even the Tribune say they can't dismiss any of this. They can't disprove what they're saying. In fact, they have confirmed over 50% of all of this that we're about to show you. The fact that Ilhan Omar refuses to comment on any of it beyond hostility or calling people racist or Islamophobes makes one willing to entertain something crazy. People who care about the truth have done enough work here that I believe enough evidence is not there to convict her, but to at least convene a grand jury. I really think we all need to know if this is a series of a few very hard-to-believe misunderstandings with some photo lookalikes, or worse. But the only ones that can answer that, the only one really, is the person refusing to comment, or the FBI. And we all know how much the left just loves good old-fashioned FBI investigations. Maybe they should convene one. Let's start at the beginning. Where did this claim originate from? Well, it actually goes back into 2016, just as Omar was set to defeat the longtime incumbent for a seat in the state legislature. A post by a user named Abdi Johnson surfaced on an internet forum called Somali Spot. Now, Somali Spot is a forum for members of the Somali community to talk about everything from politics to movies. Abdi Johnson's original discussion has now been deleted, but this is a screenshot of the original post. Quote, Ilhan Omar's marriage fraud exposure. The user goes on to explain how Ilhan married her brother to help him get into the United States and lists social media posts to back up his case. Well, local media left it alone. The mainstream media obviously wouldn't touch it. But there are some people in the country that have a lot of time on their hands, and they also are independent journalists as well. I mean, who's looking at an independent, obscure Somali message board? Well, a journalist at Alpha News began to look into the series of conflicting social media posts made by the real-life stars of Three's Company that we just told you about. David Steinberg over at PJ Media also began his digging, and he has just released new information that attempts to put all of the missing pieces in place. You'll have to decide. His new research is based on a source within the Somali community and how that information links Ilhan Omar to a UK citizen that he says is Ilhan's biological brother named Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi. Now, this is one of the most complicated stories to process that I have seen, and I've seen some complex stories. I mean, we did Acorn and the Tides Foundation, but this will make your head spin. It's basically this. It's the story of a not-so-lovely lady.
Here's the story of Ilhan Elmi, who was living in a camp for refugees. Then she got a brand new name, Ilhan Omar, and fled across the sea.
It's the story of a little Omar, long before she was a member of the squad. She had visas and her big ideas, but there's a thing called fraud. Till the one day when these Elmies met these Omars, and they solved their problem one day over lunch. That this
Somalis would have used their names and formed the Omar Bunch. The Omar Bunch. I've got a hunch that there's something screwed up with Omar's Bunch.
All right, now I want to take you through, if you're not confused yet, you will be. Let me give you the chalkboard here. This is the current theory, alleged by journalist David Steinberg. It was given to him in part by multiple sources within the Somali community in Minneapolis. And I want to make it really clear. There are real deep questions regarding how the Omars entered the country. This isn't the real story. Then I don't know what is. You can't blame Ilhan Omar, I should say. I'm not blaming Ilhan Omar, what she did as a young, I think 8-year-old daughter of a man that might have been just trying to get his family out of a horrible refugee camp. But all of what I'm about to lay out is important so you understand the overall story. In 2008, the State Department stopped accepting asylum applications from refugees that claimed that they had family members here already in the U.S. Why? Because DNA testing showed that 87% of the refugees claiming asylum from Africa were actually fraudulently claiming that they had family members current in the U.S. From the early 90s up until 2008, immigration fraud was, of this manner, was just everywhere. It was rampant. In 1995, there were 2 families in Somalia that actually had traveled to Kenya to a refugee camp. And I think it's much more than a hunch. If someone was denied entry in the United States, they could accomplish a lot more as a bunch. And this is allegedly what happened here. It looks like this. We're going to concentrate on the Omar family and the Elmi family. The Omars were headed by 2 men. These 2, Abdullahi or whatever, and Ahmed. There's a lot of Ahmeds in this story. They had been granted asylum and were going to live in Arlington, Virginia in 1995. However, the Elmis had not been granted asylum in the United States, and they included these people. This is the father, the sisters, and the 2 brothers. Okay? Now here's where it starts to get confusing. Layla, Mohammed, and Ahmed, they got sent over to the asylum that was granted to them in the UK. And so if we were going to put it onto a TV show, it'd be like upstairs, downstairs, but mainly downstairs. So they go over to the United Kingdom. Now, these 2 were going to Hollywood, USA, otherwise known as Virginia, and they're the Omars. Now, that leaves these 3. So these 3, Layla, Mohammed, and, Noor, Sarah, and Ilan, they go, where? Well, they changed their name to Omar in order to slip in with the family that had already been granted asylum. This is the theory. All right. Elmi was now known as Ilhan Omar. And that's the way they all became the Omar Bunch. But that's a big claim. Is there anything outside of official documents that ties these 2 families together? Well, Elon and Sarah both identify their dad. Here's Elon and Sarah. They both identify their dad as Noor Saeed Elmi. That's not disputed by anyone. Here is Elon's sister calling Noor her father and dad on Facebook. And there you see him. Now, Dad actually has his own Facebook page where he identifies himself simply as Noor Saeed. Notice neither the Omar or Elmi family name is included. Layla is listed just as one of his friends. Well, Layla's page is currently down, but the URL shows her name as Layla Elmi. David Steinberg received certified copy of Layla's marriage certificate in the UK that lists Noor Saeed Elmi as her father. And in 2011, Ilhan Omar posted this picture to Instagram. That's Dad in the middle and Layla on the left, and Ilhan on the right. Layla calls Dad Noor Saeed Elmi. Ilhan calls Dad Noor Saeed Omar. Well, that's not confusing at all. Here's what we need to know. Is this Noor Saeed Elmi or Noor Saeed Omar? Well, we have a picture of the guy, Omar and Saeed, and is that guy. So when the researchers went to find Noor Elmi in the UK, there were no matches for that name. So where is Layla's dad? Is this him? Okay, you could back up and say, well, wait a minute. That's Omar and Layla, but that doesn't mean that Layla and Ilhan are sisters. I mean, you know, they're not sisters. The dad's names are just... Okay. Unless you know what happened in 2016. In 2016, Ilhan Omar stated that she was harassed by a cab driver in Washington, D.C. She claimed that the cabbie called her ISIS and tried to take her hijab off. Well, a reporter from the Star Tribune saw a copy of the filed complaint. It stated that she was with her sister at the time of the event. All right, well, she's got a sister. She's got Sarah. Ilhan Omar said her sister attended a dinner with a man that hosts social events for the Somali American community. Now, upon hearing from Ilhan what had happened, he, of course, went straight to Facebook. He stated, and I quote, "On Wednesday night, I had an opportunity to have dinner with State Representative-elect Ilhan Omar and her lovely sis, Layla Elmi." He even links to Layla's Facebook page. I showed you earlier this page. It is currently now unavailable. Now, all of this certainly gives the appearance that Ilhan and Layla seem to think that they have the same dad, and his real name is Elmi, and that they are sisters. But what about the would-be husband or brother? As I showed you before, the theory says that Ahmed moved to the UK with his sister and brother after being given asylum in 1995. Now, we know for a fact that they both lived in the same suburb of London. All right, so you got them in the same town. Layla listed Camden as her residence on her marriage certificate. Ahmed listed his primary and secondary school as Haverstock, which is in Camden. Okay. David Steinberg has revealed now that officials at Haverstock show that Ahmed lived at the same address as Layla. Now that seems to fit the theory. Ahmed was a lot younger than Layla. She would have assumed guardianship as a kinship care case. All right, so she kind of would have been mom. Well, in several Instagram posts, Ahmed and Layla call each other mom and son. In 2013, Ahmed posted this picture of Layla's two daughters holding a book back from the primary school in Camden. He said, quote, "These girls rock my world, #nieces." Ilhan Omar actually interacted with the post and liked it. But just 2 years later, Ilhan and Omar took a trip to London. She posted these photos to an Instagram calling what appears to be the same girls, her nieces. So to recap, all the Elmi family members that allegedly split in '95 have not only remained in touch, but they still claim to be family on social media. And even though Ilhan Omar denies this in public statements, why does the evidence seem to overwhelmingly suggest otherwise on Facebook and Instagram? As it stands right now, the theory that began on a Somali blog site that was later expanded upon by independent journalists makes more sense than Omar's weak denial and, ever since then, complete radio silence. Yesterday, The Blaze reached out to Ilhan Omar for a statement. She would not give us or anyone else an answer, nor will she sit for an interview.
Congresswoman, would you like to clear up any of the confusion or set the record straight on the allegations of tax fraud or immigration fraud related to your two marriages?
All right. If any of this is true, marrying her brother for a visa to come to school here is fraud of the system, a fraud of the university, a fraud of the voters that put her in office. However, it is her possible perjury under oath and taxes that are very, very clear. It's important for America to know who our representatives really are. It's perhaps more important that we know who these people really are when they're coming from devastated lands like Somalia. I remind you that the Nazarene Fund really wasn't bringing in any Christians at all into the United States because the vetting process was said to be below U.S. standards. Well, I don't know what's happened to the standards since, but at that time you couldn't get them any lower. America not only needs to know who their representatives are, but we also need to know who our new citizens are. And when it comes to those public servants, if they aren't who they say they are, if they are hiding anything, they could be blackmailed at best. They may be under the influence of others, organizations like, let's say, CARE, or the Muslim Brotherhood, which, by the way, we have ample evidence that she is deeply in bed with. We also have ample evidence that CARE, an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation, is run by the Muslim Brotherhood, and whose sister organization is Hamas. Do you think Americans should know who this is? Why is she refusing to answer any questions at all on what appears to be clear felonies? Why the cloak and dagger over Ahmed Elmi? Where is he? Was there any fraud perpetrated in order to gain an American education? These are answers, at the very least, she owes the citizens of Minnesota, but also, maybe more importantly, the voters she claims to represent and the system she claims to represent all over the country. One last question. It's one that I asked myself this morning. If this is such a big deal, where's the Attorney General? The state of Minnesota should be going after her. Where's the Attorney General? Might I perhaps answer that question with 4 simple words? Attorney General Keith Ellison. All right. Now, every time you pay your cell phone bill, you are giving money to the left. I am not kidding you. AT&T, Verizon, they are shipping money to Planned Parenthood and everywhere else. I think you can see tonight why. I want you to know that we had this story at The Blaze. It was given to me personally about a week and a half ago. I gave it to our managing editor, Leon Wolf, to look into this, to verify each piece and every document that we have verifying this story. At the last hour, it was given to another publishing group, and they published it. We don't care if we're first or not. We just want to be accurate. I wanted to get Leon on because he was the guy that was doing all the legwork. Leon, welcome to the program. How sure are you on this evidence?
Well, as an editor, I always try to keep in mind that, Stephen Glass is kind of the cautionary tale of all time, really, for our, purposes, because, he got away, for those of you who don't know, that with fabricating stories in the liberal New Republic for years and years. And when they finally caught him, they did some soul searching, and they said the reason he was able to get away with this was because his stories match too well with what we wanted to believe anyway.
Right,
so I'm always very cautious when a story like this comes along. I want to dig in a little deeper, even though it's something that I would tend to believe. I would be more confident if I was able to see all of the original documents that Mr. Steinberg and I discussed.
You saw I have all the documents, so you saw them, but you didn't hold the originals. Correct. Is that what you're saying?
I wasn't able to go back and redo, like, when somebody provides you documents that are based on background checks and things like that, you want to go and do them yourself. Make sure they turn up the same stuff that the paper the guy is giving you. So I wasn't able to do that. But it all seems to point in one direction. And I would say this with 100% certainty. I don't know 100% that she married her brother, but I know 100% that if this was probably, Joe Smith from Tennessee, congressperson, Republican, the media would be all over this, like, ants on a pile of sugar.
Right.
I 100% believe that.
And there are things, according to her timeline, that we do know. For instance, we know whoever Ahmed was, Elmi, he was living at that address. We do know that they were married. We just don't know for sure who that guy is, why they were married by a a Christian pastor when they're both Muslim. We don't know any of those things for sure. Anything that goes to Facebook really is going to require her to verify.
And some of it is still active. Like a lot of the stuff about the sister, you can still, at least when I went and looked before the publication of this, her page was still active and up and still had many of those pictures. Now, we don't know, like, I can't tell for certain that those girls are the same girls. Really, I can't tell at all. Like, that was one of the big questions that I had. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
the ones
the
that
two
are
girls, the nieces.
identified as nieces. The second picture is just, their faces are too far away. I can't tell at all. Like, without somebody who knows them actually vouching, oh yeah, this picture of the same girls, I can't tell with my eyes that they're the same girls at all. So some of that stuff we do need to verify, but there's enough that we have now that
there should be a grand jury, at least. There should be a grand jury. Okay, let me ask you this. You're also an attorney, and you have seen cases like this over and over again. How bad is this situation legally for her? If these things are true, where she committed fraudulent, doesn't matter if it's her brother or not, fraudulent marriage, changed her name to get into the country, lied on tax documents, all of these things, what would happen if this were you or me?
Well, that's kind of an interesting thing, because, the standard criminal fraud federally is usually capped at 5 years. Most species of fraud are capped at 5 years federally, including specifically immigration fraud by marriage is a 5-year penalty. But it is kind of interesting. A lot of these crimes don't get prosecuted by the feds unless they're a high-profile person. And particularly the immigration fraud thing, we talk about illegal immigration a lot here. Crossing the border illegally is actually a misdemeanor, like a maximum 6-month penalty, very light slap on the wrist. And what prosecutors do a lot of times, because people come across not just with nothing, they come across with fraudulent immigration documents, they hold that as like a cudgel over the person's head to say, if you don't contest us deporting you, we won't try to put you in prison for 5 years for immigration fraud. We'll just ding you for crossing the border and send you back. So that does happen a lot, and perjury is probably not prosecuted as often as it should be. But for somebody who's as high profile as this, usually this is somebody a prosecutor would probably want to try to make an example of and face a lot of years in prison. Because that's the thing about crimes like this that are hard to catch. When you do catch somebody, and when it is somebody who's high profile, who holds a position of public trust, like being in Congress, they tend to have the book thrown at them.
Leon, thank you so much. We'll have more on the Blaze about this. We will continue to follow this story, and I will tell you this. I think where somebody, and maybe we can start this ourselves, we need to start looking at the Attorney General in Minnesota. He went to become the Attorney General, and she replaced him in Congress. Keith Ellison. Why is the Attorney General not following this up in Minnesota? Back in a minute.